So we know that it's really important for young people to be a part of these democratic processes. So essentially, why is this committee so interested in hearing from young people?
Well, it's absolutely critical that young people have their say in our democracy. What we know is that there is a slightly lower turnout amongst 20 and 30-year-old voters and indeed voters in their late teens. And it's absolutely critical that their voices are heard in our democracy, because ultimately the government of Victoria isn't a government for just who turns up. It's a government for everyone. And it's really, really critical that we hear the voices of young people right throughout the process, and not just in the election itself, but in the review of the election. And that's what this committee is doing, reviewing the election to make sure that if there are improvements to be made, particularly when it comes to getting young people engaged with the political process, that we can make those improvements.
Awesome. So what essentially do you want young people to be telling you?
Well, we want them to tell us what they're thinking. I can't pretend to understand what the thinking process is for a 19-year-old voting in their first election. I don't know where they're accessing their information, and we don't know how their engagement with the political process is defined. We do know that social media is a really important part of way younger people get their news, and we need to understand as an election process and as a parliament just how it is that access point for news and information relates to their experience of the election. But it's not just that, of course. It's even the experience of turning up on election day. Many young people now, of course, rarely pick up a pen and paper. So it's a bit of an arcane or perhaps something of an old-fashioned process to be engaging with government in that way rather than perhaps via online. So it's really important for us to understand how we can make that process of physically voting as easy and as accessible as possible.
And I want to know as well, so is this committee, is it just about voting? Like what's it about?
Sure, so the Electoral Matters Committee looks at the entirety of the electoral process. So it's not just about the act of voting, it's also all the things that happen prior to and indeed after that. But in particular, campaigns and candidates are regulated as part of this process. And what we want to make sure is that the conduct of campaigns and candidates is fair, but also that that they're engaging with young people in a way that is useful and meaningful and relevant for them. There is always a danger that some of the conduct of campaigns and candidates might put young people off, either off the democratic process or off government or off voting. And that's something we absolutely don't want to see. It's really important for us to make sure that we have young people fully engaged with the process as much as we possibly can.
As you said, there are quite a lot of barriers, I think, facing young people and maybe stopping young people from turning up to these voting booths. What are some of these barriers that you have observed?
Look, we have our own ideas about that, and our real challenge here is making sure that we reach out to those people who've had that experience. Now, of course, if they're sufficiently disengaged that they haven't voted, they're probably not so engaged that they're necessarily going to participate in this process unless we find them. So that's where you come in, Ren. You've got to help us find the people who have been excluded somehow from this process, make sure that they're given an opportunity to tell us what they think. And it's pretty easy. You can send us an email, you can even write us a letter, but you can certainly fill in a form on the website. It doesn't have to be 3,000 words, it can be 3 sentences. And our job is to make sure that every single voice that we can find, particularly among young people, are given the very best opportunity to participate in the review of the election and making sure that the election and future elections are relevant for them.
Yeah, relevant for young people.
That's right.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Will.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having us.